Welcome to all my listeners and subscribers out there to another episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, episode 93. I'm your host, Mark Hasara, and for over 60 years, my passion has been everything aviation, as you can see here behind me. I am an airplane nerd. On the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, we debrief some of the most fascinating and intriguing pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from being in these extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even general aviation environments? The purpose of our show is to illustrate how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground from the lessons that we learned from these people that we interviewed. Some of these lessons and stories are being told here on the Lessons from the Cockpit Show for the very first time. This episode, episode 93, is financially supported by Wall Pilot, aviation art for the walls of your home office or hang. These are beautiful 4, 6, and 8 foot long prints that you can peel off and stick to your wall, like this KC-135 here you see behind me. They're exhaustively researched and extremely detailed. There's 154 ready to print right now at wallpilot.com, or go to the website and have us make you a custom print of your favorite airplane with your name on it from whatever unit that you like. We can even do bomb loads, weapons loads on it. Go to wallpilot.com and order 2 or 3 of these because this is how we financially support the show. On today's show, folks, I was asked via email, hey, I got a great story and I would love to be on your show. And as I talked to him, he did have a great story. I've said many times that you fly with your 5 senses. What happens when one of those senses deteriorates to the point it's no longer functional? Today, we're going to talk to Steve Porchaska, flying with a cochlear ear plant, flying executive jets and carrying cargo. Grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit Show with my friend Steve Porchaska.
Cool. Hey, hi.
Steve, welcome to the Lessons from the Cockpit Show. Afternoon to you, brother.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, man. I'm doing good. We're looking at some clear skies, but we're supposed to get snow through the weekend here in the mountains. All the skiers are all like going nuts, because none of the resorts are open because we don't have enough. But life's good out here. Life's good out here. Again, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
It's good to be here.
Good. So just quickly tell everybody who you are. And more
Okay,
importantly, after you say this is who I am, this is what I'm doing now. How did you become interested in flying?
sure. There's a story. We can almost write a book on that. I'm
I
sure
know how to do
everybody has
that,
a
Steve.
I'm sure everybody has a bumpy path somewhere along the way, but mine's been a little bit more like a gravel road on the back parts of Colorado. Really bumpy. Let's see. I started flying back about 1997 time frame, and it's been uphill ever since. So I soloed in a Cessna 150 down to Washington, Iowa, and remember my first flight instructor. His name was Terry Spitzer from a long time ago, and always been an Iowa native. So I did my first college experience at Indian Hills Community College in Ottumwa, Iowa, right our O'Reilly town. And did my
Boy, you're really dating yourself there, brother.
Got to remember those good old days.
Yeah.
The airport has changed a lot ever since then. They used to have a nice airport restaurant on the field. It's gone now, or at least last I checked it was. Oh, I couldn't believe they got rid of it. That was one of the best places if you were looking for the $100 burger. That was the place to go.
Yep.
And then went up to Albert Lea, Minnesota, did a 2-week literal crash course on getting my initial CFI, flight instructor rating. and passed it with the FSDO. That was a grueling experience, an all-day affair. And we used two airplanes for that check ride. And it was a Piper Arrow for the complex part and the Piper Cherokee for all the other flying. And
Wow.
then,
But ever since you're a kid, you wanted to fly, right? I mean, this has been something, what was your first experience with airplanes where you go, oh man, I want to do this?
while I was growing up on the farm, just about a couple miles south of the Cedar Rapids Airport,
Yeah.
um, there wasn't a day that didn't go by when I was out in the fields, looked
Yeah.
up, and all of a sudden there was an airplane going right overhead. Everything. It's like,
Yeah.
God, I got to get up there. I got to get up
Yeah.
there. It looked like it was just so fun and everything. And then Civil Air Patrol during my cadet days, they introduced me to flying, and I was like, oh, this is where I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, Steve, because I have met a lot of people that got interested while flying with Civil Air Patrol. A lot of people, a lot of young high school kids at our
Mm-hmm.
junior ROTC joined Civil Air Patrol, were able to get their private license and launch from there. Matter of fact, Gail Halverson, the candy bomber, was a Civil Air Patrol guy. And that's
I
how he got
did not
interested. Yeah.
know that.
I didn't know that either. Yeah. He was Civil Air Patrol. And then he had, of course, ramping up for World War II and everything. And then he jumped right in. I mean, Civil Air Patrol has been the vehicle for a lot of pilots to get their
It
career started.
is, and it's produced a lot of good cadets that have gone on for military careers
Mhm.
as well as civilian careers. So
Yeah.
to me, it is a wonderful asset.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you got your CFI and then obviously moved up to uh,
Got
other
my
certifications and
double
everything.
I and MEI. I did my double I down in Florida. I was trying to get a job down there, and somebody was telling me that really get yourself more marketable, you got to get your double I. So I went to American Flyers down in Kissimmee
Hmm.
and got got my double I down there. That was another one. That was another fun one. Did my check ride during Sun and Fun.
Oh my gosh. Down the beach? Yeah.
Airplanes all over the area. It was nuts. Oh, and it was a really super windy day. And I flew for part of the instrument instructor check, right? We flew a perfect ILS all the way down on the in Sanford. And the winds were out of the north at like about 25 knots. And so I was
Wow.
flying this with a Cessna 172 and doing a crosshair all the way down. She was like, okay, let's take it back to Kissimmee. You did really good on this. And
Yeah.
like, but we kept part of the check ride short, and it was like we didn't do a hold. But she goes, I know you know how to do a hold and everything. Let's
Yeah.
just go ahead and head on back. So we did a GPS approach back in Kissimmee, landed, and she goes, I only got one more question for you. Would you take a student up in those conditions for their for their instrument training? And I said, a beginning student, probably not.
Yeah.
But for one that's getting ready for a check ride, yes, I would. And she goes, good answer. You passed. Here you go.
Yeah. That is a really good answer. What's the quality of the student I'm flying with? What's his or her experience?
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was an instructor in KC-135s, uh, I would obviously not do some of the really, really hard things with a brand new co-pilot that I
Mm-hmm.
would with a more experienced one. I actually deployed once with a brand new co-pilot. It was his very first deployment. And
Mm-hmm.
we're flying into Diego Garcia and flying B-52 missions out of Diego. And
Oh,
man,
cool.
yeah, well, and you know what, Steve? The interesting thing about doing that, Steve, was the weather. and
Hmm.
you talk about 25 knot winds, and it was like you could set your watch by it. 4 o'clock in the afternoon down in the South Indian Ocean, you get these monster thunderstorms, kind of like you did in Florida, about every 4:30 in the afternoon in the summertime, you know.
Bingo,
Yeah,
clockwork. Take it
yeah,
to
it's like, yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like clockwork. And so we had to do some really kind of interesting weather avoidance. And the other
yeah.
the other
And
interesting thing too about that is the KC-135 had in its regulations, you had to have an hour and a half of holding fuel when you had an island destination for that very reason.
mhm.
And there were times where we had to wait for the out to the east or the west of the island for the thunderstorms to go by. And then you'd land in just like puddles of water. All right. And I remember this co-pilot, he did a really good job. He did a really good job. Okay. Set it down kind of firm, but that's kind of how you want to do it sometimes too, when you want to break the plane of the water and everything. But yeah, you're right. It depends on the skill level of your student.
Yeah,
And I
you just got to pick the time and place. Sometimes they're, even though it's like a beautiful VFR day today, they may not be ready for those kind of conditions. I mean,
no,
it just all
no,
depends on the student, the class. The airplane is the most expensive classroom to be instructing
yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mine was $3,200 an hour.
Wow.
you know,
Wow.
yeah, something
I've
like
heard
that.
that the plane that I just recently got trained to fly,
Yeah,
it's like about $3,000 an hour.
yeah. And like you said, jet time can be expensive, okay? Particularly when
Oh,
you've got
wow.
4 engines. But I carried 180,000 pounds of gas, so uh, we could retrograde to like Rio de Janeiro for crying out loud if we had to, you know. So anyway, uh, to keep going here, obviously you get all your tickets punched and everything.
Yeah,
And
and I did my multi-engine instructor during my time in St. Louis. That school is no longer in business today.
is that
Uh,
Parks?
no, not Parks. It was Alton Academy of Aviation or something like that. It
Yeah,
was in Alton, Illinois, just
yeah,
on the other side of the river there. And
yeah,
it was a really good school at one point, but for whatever reason, they had financial difficulty and they
yeah,
shuttered their doors.
yeah,
And that's kind of a sad story there too by itself. So,
yeah.
and then I got my did quite a bit of flight instructing for a lot of schools over the years. My very first flight instructing job was working for all ATPs out of Daytona Beach, Florida.
Oh,
That was
hardship tour, Daytona Beach. Hardship tour. Yeah.
with that.
A hardship tour, man. That's a great place to have to fly out of, Daytona Beach. That's why I say that's what we call a hardship tour. Oh man, I got to live on the beach. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh
yeah,
yeah. It was party town. It was a big
yeah,
party town. So there were always parties, but I've always abstained from the party scene.
yeah,
So because it is so easy to get roped up into that, and then you start
yeah.
getting into trouble and everything. You don't need that on your record.
No, you don't. You don't. Now, Steve, through your journey through all of this, you had a very unique medical problem that you had to deal with. Why don't
Yes,
you
I
talk to us about that? Because Steve, as you well know, there's a lot of people out there that go, well, I've got this kind of eyesight, I've got a heart murmur, I've got all these kinds of things that will probably keep you from flying in the military, but may not keep you from flying commercially or privately
Yeah,
either.
the
So,
nice thing is in the medical regulations there's a part in there that talks about the waiver program, and I have one of those, and because my I have a cochlear implant. This is a cybernetically. You can see here the little
mhm,
device that just slapped right on the side of my head, and This here doesn't work at all. This one's just decoration. It helps hold my glasses up during the day. I'm waiting for University of Iowa to fix this one. I really want two good working gears again one
Yeah.
day, but I'm pretty happy with having just one. And this is cybernetically. I mean, they had to put hardware on the inside of my head. And
Yeah.
then this hearing aid system, it takes everything outside and dumps it in inside. So,
Yeah. So how
and
did your hearing deteriorate over a period of time, or did you just lose it all at once, or what happened?
well,
If
it
you don't
was right
mind me asking.
around age 5 when my parents first noticed I wasn't talking like a normal 5-year-old. And this was back in the
Uh,
1970s. So they didn't
mhm.
have these fancy MRI machines, CT scanners, and whatnot. Um, so they did exploratory surgery back then, cut everything open, take a look. It's work, it's there. Can't explain it. And then ever since then, one day my hearing would be really good, the next day it'd be down in the
Mhm.
dumpster, and the next day it'd be back up again. It was all over the chart, and nobody could explain why.
Ah,
There's no medical explanation for why my hearing fluctuated all over the place. But it was right after I got my multi-engine ticket in 2001. I just graduated from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale,
uh-huh.
just got my multi-engine ticket, and the examiner goes, "You can fly this thing great, but your communication was marginal,
Yeah.
and you got everything that I need to see to sign you off and all, but I would get your ears checked out and find out what's going on." So I made an appointment at University of Iowa, got my ears checked out, and Dr. Rubenstein, who was the surgeon at the time that worked on my ears, he goes, "Got good news and bad news for you. Which would you like to have first?" And I said, "Let's start in alphabetical order and let's start with the bad." And he goes, "You got about 2 years of hearing remaining, and then you're going to be totally deaf." And I was like,
Oh,
"Boy, that hurt."
yeah.
And he goes, then I go, "Okay, what's the good news? Or what are my options?" And he goes, "You got a choice. You can get this cochlear implant system now, or wait 2 years and go deaf and then come back and get it." That's a choice.
That's a choice. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Great. Let's do that. So I said, life kind of sucked. I was barely even using one of these cell phone thingies and everything. So I just said, let's just go ahead and do it now. So in 2002, February of 2002, I got implanted, and it was like breaking a leg. Once they put this cochlear implant system in, that's it. Your normal hearing is gone. You have
Yeah.
no hearing after that.
Yeah.
And for 6 weeks, I had to put up with pure silence. And that was the most torturous session that I've ever been through.
Really? So how did they do that? I mean, how did they did you have to have a special fair pair of like earmuffs or something? Or how did they keep that all from happening? I mean, because it's a vibration kind of thing.
Well, once they drilled a hole into my head, literally drilled a small hole into my head, put the hardware in,
Hmm.
and then closed everything up. And they got allowed time for the all the new
Yeah.
equipment to heal into the body. So that's why it takes 6 weeks for everything to heal up. I think now today it's 4 weeks, but still, that even 4 weeks, that's a long time to hear nothing.
Yeah.
So then we turned the system on, and like I say, it's like breaking a leg. You're not going to get up and start running out the door as soon as they turn the system on and
Yeah.
everything. So I had to relearn how to hear all over again, because the brain hears one sound and it doesn't like associate it from the sounds that you were hearing before. So you have to re essentially reprogram your brain too with this.
Wow. That's something I can't even imagine, particularly no sound for 6 weeks. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
particularly being a pilot, because communication is huge, is key to flying. Talking to
Yeah.
air traffic control, talking to towers, everything. And
Yes. Yes. It is a must. You have to have this to operate in our environment today. However, you can, as a deaf pilot, if you stay out of controlled airspace where you have to deal with air traffic control there, you can
yeah.
fly. Ultralight pilots, they fly all the time in Class G airspace and E
Mhm.
airspace, but they don't communicate with air traffic control. They just fly along and have a grand old time. They're looking, seeing, avoiding, just like everybody else does. So,
See,
um,
I never thought of that.
yeah.
I never thought of that because but that's probably because of my military background. And,
Mm-hmm.
they go through us with a fine tooth comb, and fortunately for me, I was in college, I was weightlifting, I was
Yeah.
blessed with extremely good eyesight. I had 2012 vision.
Mm-hmm.
I could read line 12B, and they're like going, okay, well,
I
your
could get
eyesight's not that
jealous right about now.
good. I know. I know. Okay. I can't do that now. Okay. I could when I was a college kid. I had,
Back in the day, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was blessed with really, really good eyesight,
I
and
had really good eyesight until I got to the end of my high school days, and then they said you're going to need glasses from here on out. I was like,
well,
that's it.
I use reading glasses,
Yeah.
and how I found out that I needed glasses was I build plastic model planes. Okay.
Mm,
And I was working on an F-16, and the F-16 had what's called high-speed anti-radiation missiles on it, harm missiles. And I'm working on the harm missile. I'm like going, I
yeah.
can't see this anymore. I got to put it out here, to see it and everything like that, And I was
That
still
was
on
one of my
active
first
duty
models too. Was a F-16.
with F-16. And so I went to the flight doc and I said, hey, I think I'm losing some of my nearsightedness or something like that. He goes, oh, well, let's get you an appointment, go take a look. And so it was toward the end of my career, and I go in and they put me, with all the funny lenses and everything like that. And the doctor says, okay, we're done, and I'm like, we've only been doing this for like 5 minutes. He goes, I have everything I need to know. I go, okay. He goes, yep, you've lost some eyesight. You're near, you got some nearsightedness going on. Okay. And then he says to me, congratulations, you've had 42 good years. I'm like going, thanks a lot. I said, what does this mean? I said, what does this mean? He goes, we have to put a thing in your records. We have to put a thing in your flight record saying, you know, you have to fly with reading glasses. And
Yep.
sure enough, I remember flying a flight up one night and I'm like going, wow, I'm having a hard time seeing that. And that was the problem, was because I was looking at the approach plates, and the flip books and everything. I couldn't see it. I had a hard time seeing it. And even though it doesn't matter how much red light you put on it and everything like that, I still had a hard time seeing it. And that's when I realized, ooh,
Yep.
yeah.
Never.
This one flight doc, he was really funny. Okay. He was a great flight doc. Well, Sluggo, you've had 42 good years. You're getting older. Okay. Sucks getting old, brother. And
Yeah, I'm starting to see some gray hair starting to sneak out off to the side
yeah, I
here.
noticed
It's
that.
like, oh, stop it.
I was going gray when I was 35. So, but
Wow.
but so you overcome this with the cochlear
Yep.
ear plant and everything, and you continue flying, obviously.
Yep. Yep. I have what is called a statement of demonstrated ability. And I had to show to the FAA that I can still do this. Um, and I've got my SOTA, and it's a one-time issuance. So once it's issued, that's it. You carry that around with you for life now. So, but yeah.
Ah, So it's a
Yep.
permanent thing in your record that, but
It's
you obviously had to go demonstrate to some FAA check airman that, okay, I can talk and
actually
fly this
was the
airplane.
aeromedical surgeons down in Oklahoma City.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. And we did it all over the phone. And it was like, you're communicating with me over the phone and everything. Great. So instead of having to do a medical test flight, they just issued it over the phone. And he goes, yep.
That's fascinating.
It was fascinating. I've
Over a
never
phone
heard of
call.
it.
Because I
Yeah.
would have thought they'd had to put you like in a booth and put the headsets on you, all the different hearing things that we had to go through. They actually did it over the phone though, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So it was wild. It was crazy. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you very much. So,
Wow.
yeah, that's how I got it.
Uh-huh. So
And
I thought this was really fascinating. And you and I have been going back and forth about setting up this interview for quite a while. Uh, you currently fly Falcon 20s for a cargo air
yeah, I
cargo, right?
was flying for Ameristar Air Cargo,
Hmm.
and we were flying Falcon 20s at the time. I have switched companies since then. I'm now
Uh-huh.
flying for Fly Exclusive, flying Citation CJ3s now.
Okay.
And but the Falcon 20, that was a dinosaur way back from the 1960s.
Oh man, that was the first airplane that like FedEx was using. I remember sticking my
That's
head.
right.
I remember sticking my head, Steve, in a FedEx Falcon 20 at San Jose International Airport when I was a kid in high school,
Mm,
going, "Wow, this has been around a long time," you know,
They and they're still flying them today.
and they're still flying them today. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about what you do, because in the phone call that you and I had prior to our interview here, you talked about some of the things that you do in the
as
air
a
cargo
as
industry.
a air cargo pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what we fly at all hours of the day. I mean, we have to live with our phone because as soon as the call comes in, we got 1 hour to get to the airport, get the airplane ready to go, and get it in the air. And then, I mean, the call could come in at 2 in the morning, or it could come in at 3 in the afternoon. You don't know when that phone call is going to come in, so you live with your phone call. It's a
Mhm.
it's a 9 on 6 off rotation. So 9 days you're living with your phone. The 6 days off, you can forget your phone and not deal with it. So um, but you've lived with your phone. But once you got out there, it's pull the cowl plugs out, the get everything ready to go, check the weather, and get it in the air as fast as you can. And it was a go, 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 go.
Oh, yeah. It's like launching off of alert, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And
Yep.
you're based out of Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, I was based out of Cedar Rapids.
Okay. So obviously you'd have to go pick up the items of
The
cargo.
company flew us to wherever the airplane was
Okay.
parked at. So if it was like parked down in Nashville, Tennessee, the company would airline us to Nashville, and then
Mhm.
we'd sit at a hotel in Nashville, wait for the call to come, and then that's where we would go. And then wherever we got done flying at, that's where we would do our 10-hour rest break at.
Okay.
So at
So,
the end of the mission, and
mhm.
yeah,
So a CRJ, that's Embraer equipment.
No, the CJ3, that
Yeah.
is actually Cessna. It's a Cessna
Oh,
Citation.
oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. I do not know my private jets like I do other things, man. You know, and that's
Yeah.
not a really big airplane, obviously. I mean, you're not hauling
Nope,
big parts, but
it's 8 passengers. You can stick 8 people into that thing, and you kind of got to wiggle your way in it. It's
yeah,
a small. It's not something like a CRJ where you can stand up and walk down the aisle.
yeah.
You got to kind of wiggle your way. You're in there, and um, but it's a nice airplane. It's pressurized, goes all the way up to flight level 450.
Wow.
Um, Obviously, it's got known icing capabilities. It's not super fast. The top speed is Mach 7, 0.737.
That's still pretty quick, though.
That's still pretty quick. You're
Pretty quick.
moving along quite
Yeah,
nicely.
you are.
Although the Falcon was faster, it had a top speed of 8.3. So it was like, man,
Isn't that incredible?
I got to
A
put the speed brake
1960s jet.
on now.
Yeah, a 1960s jet that you got to slow down. Anyway, how old are these airplanes you're flying? Because it leads into my next question. What kind of avionics suite do you have
Well,
in the cockpit?
the airplane they got me most recently checked out in as the Garmin 3000 flight deck. Essentially, it
Mhm.
looks like a video game flight deck.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull up an image here for you. This is from flight safety. So
You know
come
what,
on.
Steve? I was just at the NBAA show in Las Vegas, and
Oh, I so wanted to go there and see that.
Garmin had a big booth, and they had all of their airplane architectures up, little mock-ups of them and everything. So I got to see the Garmin 3000. It was incredible. You know, it's really
Yeah,
cool.
and I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but you can see that right there. That's
Yeah,
the Garmin Avion.
yeah,
It's like they were telling me, the instructors were telling me, this is essentially a video game machine now,
yeah,
and the kids love it. And I'm
yeah,
like, you could.
yeah,
I mean, the old Falcon 20s that I was flying was all still steam gauge,
yeah.
and I had flown G1000 equipment before, so I had an
Mhm.
idea of what I was getting myself into.
Yeah,
But the way how everything is done, it's just blowing me away.
yeah.
All of my training, like from the time I did my instrument training in '98 all the way up
Hmm.
through early 2000, and so it was all steam gauge, round dials, and
Yeah,
everything. And
yeah,
then to eventually go over to G1000, I was like, "Whoa, this is crazy that we got
yeah.
all this glass equipment." And
Hmm.
if you looked at that G3000 flight deck, there are no round dials at all in that on that flight deck. Even
Yeah,
the standby equipment is a TV screen.
yeah, yeah. Okay, hang on. I'm going to do something here. That comes up when I edit as a place that I'm going to stick something in. Okay. I'm going to edit this out. But what I'm going to do is I'll put a picture in the video that shows the Garmin 3000 system so that everybody can see it while you're talking about it. All right.
Oh, okay,
All right.
okay.
So just describe really quickly, you talk about all the different TV screens and everything like that. And as you could see, it looked like there was three flat screens all the way across. And obviously you've got enhanced vision, all these other great tools that are inside the Garmin system. Can you just speak to those just real quick?
Which the flight director, the
Yeah, the flight director and all the different layers that you can put on that flat screen. Because
oh,
can,
you can make it like an HSI. You can make it they have on like Airbus, on the Airbuses, they have like the dual Q system, and then they have the old I was always raised on the single Q system, whereas the
Mhm.
V bars.
Yes,
And the
yes.
you can make it your deck. You can make your side into what you want to fly it as. So
Mhm.
if you want a single queue with the V bars, you can make it so. Or if you want to fly it with the crosshairs, you can do that too. You can set it up however you want it to. It has TCAS on board, which is your traffic collision avoidance system,
Yep.
and it's also got the TWAS system, which is terrain warning alert system, so you don't crash into terrain. And that new G3000 system also had synthetic vision on it. So you would as you're taxiing along on the runway, you'd see, in a nutshell, the road right in front of you, just as it is on the TV screen. And it's just incredible. incredible.
Yeah. See, I used to live in Cedar Rapids. I worked with Rockwell Collins. Okay. And I remember seeing a lot of this stuff for the very first time. I mean, I had my old KC 135 cockpit, and I got to remind everybody Eisenhower signed that check. So that tells you what kind of technology we had in the thing at first, you know. But I remember going into it was called a reconfigurable cockpit, Steve, and it had
Mm-hmm.
that in it. It had the heads up guidance system, like the HUD
The
for
HUD, yeah.
everything, had the three screens across. Um, the center one was engine and checklist and all that kind of stuff. And the scenario or the place that they were flying this thing into was Jackson Hole, Wyoming,
Ah,
because
yes.
you could literally simulate all three different kinds of weather phenomenon there in Jackson Hole. You can have thunderstorms, you can have snowstorms, high and hot, during the summertime, all those different things. And I remember flying with, for the very first time, with the heads up guidance system and the synthetic vision system on the display in front of me, with like about a 5 mile square. Oh my gosh, it was incredible. You know, it was incredible because the amount of situational awareness that kind of cockpit gives you is just phenomenal. You know, phenomenal.
I was blown away. I mean, when I first got into the thing, I mean, I was prepared to be blown away. But once I got into the simulator and actually get trained to how to use this thing and everything, it just blew me even further away than
Yeah.
my expectations were. It was just so advanced. It really makes me wish I was 20 something again.
Yeah, don't we all?
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
yeah. So does your airplane have a heads up guidance system in it
I
on one side?
wish we do not have that in
Yeah.
our airplane. I've heard it is an option on some of the others that are out there, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's not in ours. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
It's funny, Steve. All of my fighter buddies that went into the airlines, they were all HUD cripples. They flew off the HUD so much. And when the heads up guidance system started showing up in like 737s, 757s, they're like going, oh, finally, because they were such HUD cripples. A friend of mine who flew F-16s and flew 737s at Delta for a very long time. He used that phrase. I'm a HUD cripple. And finally, when we got HUDs back in the airplane, he says, I could finally feel comfortable in the airplane again. I'm going, Terry, for crying out loud, man, you got all this
wow,
stuff all the way across, all these displays and everything, And he said, really, that one piece of glass in front of you because you have to remember, Mark, I flew F-16s half my life, and having that was, and what was crazy in this advanced simulator that I was flying was they could put the enhanced vision system on it so you could actually see through the muck. That was what was really incredible, was when you had that enhanced vision system camera out in front of you that could see down through the weather so that you could see the airfield like 8, 9 miles out. I just thought that was crazy. And
I could, the fair. I think it was during my days at where the heck was it? I'm trying to remember. Oh gosh, I think it was while I was at Daytona Beach. We had an FAA wing seminar saying, what is the future bringing to aviation? And so we could get this kind of a glimpse into seeing what the technologies they were coming out with today. And
yeah,
they showed this one, I think it was a Gulfstream that they were using. It had that enhanced vision system on it, and they flew it into some airport out in Colorado at night in foggy weather. I mean, essentially, it was 0, 0.
yeah, yeah. They flew it
And
into Aspen. They flew it into Aspen, which is a really dangerous place to fly.
oh yes, we did that during my simulator training. We trained exclusively for Aspen, and
Yeah,
I was like, this is crazy.
yeah.
And that's the sad part is it's one way in, one way out.
Hmm. Yeah. And there's a lot of private jets that fly into Aspen into some pretty gnarly weather. and
Mm-hmm.
and the terrain too, Steve. Oh my gosh, this terrain there. Because uh, I remember seeing that video I think you're talking about. And as you're coming in, you're flying over a fairly decent peak that's underneath you too. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And uh it's chilling. Okay. I believe the Air Force lost a C-21 Learjet up there uh that packed it into that mountain or something like that when they were doing like a circling approach or something like that. It's a really crazy place to fly in, particularly when you look at the instrument approach and you look at the Jepson chart for going in there, you know, it's crazy, you know?
Yeah. I'm like, what were if I was an airport designer, I would have put that airport someplace else. And I mean, I know why they put it, I know why they built it where they did, but
Yeah.
I would not have
Yeah.
done that.
Yeah. Tom Cruise has got to be able to get to his house, you know? Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, there's a lot of people that fly into Aspen and it could be a very potentially dangerous place. So that's where you train. See, that's what like we were doing at Jackson Hole was because you had mountains all around you. There was actually a C-130 that crashed, killed everybody on board, taking off too heavy, too hot, too high out of Aspen once, you know, or out of Jackson Hole. And Aspen's kind of the same way. So, um, you know, it's interesting because you talked a little bit ago about the experience level of the people that you're instructing. And obviously, Aspen and Jackson Hole are for very experienced pilots. All right. That's not
Well,
somebody
for
you would
I
take a
mean, they're
new instrument
starting
guy to.
my company. They're starting me out as a first officer, even though I have a captain rating on the airplane. I am
Yeah.
captain qualified for the airplane. They're still starting me out as a first officer just to get my experience
Hmm.
level up, so that I can one day just hop right over into the
Yeah.
left seat and everything.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be riding around with these captains and getting some good experience in, and I'm looking very forward to flying the real thing now.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah. Hey, I have a question for you. What is the craziest piece of cargo that you've had to like wake up in the middle of the night and
oh
go pick
gee,
up and
yeah,
take
that.
somewhere?
Oh
Talk to
my,
me about some of those experiences where you had to pick
there.
up some crazy kind of cargo and
Oh,
take it to some crazy place.
Adam, during my days at Ameristar, we had one. We woke up and a company called us up. I think it was somewhere around about 4 in the morning. I think it was about 4 in the morning. They called us up at El Paso. We had to fly to Chino, California,
Mhm.
pick up this box. The box was maybe 25 pounds, maybe 25 pounds.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking, well, what are the dimensions on it or anything? I was expecting a great big pallet or something, but it was an itty bitty box, about 25 pounds, about maybe the size of my tablet here. And I was like, we're taking this box all the way to Greensboro, South Carolina? What? It's like, what's in this box that we got to get there now?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we had to do a fuel stop on the way from California. We had to stop in oh, someplace in Texas. I don't remember where now, but we stopped there, got a little bit of gas, and then continued all the way to Greensboro, South Carolina.
Did you ever find out what was in the box?
No, I never found out what was in the box. I never found out. I so badly wanted to rip the box open and find out what the heck is in it. That I mean, this Falcon is probably you're looking at maybe $100,000 or something. It's like, what is worth $100,000 to transport from one side of the country to the other side of the country? What was in the box? I mean, I really got to
Well,
know.
you know, I'm looking at my laptop and 25 pounds. You know, that's not a, that's kind of a heavy piece of whatever in a small
Yeah,
box, you know, and I'm sure you guys are probably looking back like this going, what the heck do we got back here? You know?
yeah. It's I mean, we had it right behind the cockpit. It was just laying on the floor in the back of the cockpit. It was just like, oh, can I? Hey, Bud, would you mind if I just?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bring some duct tape, put it back together.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Um, and then the other fun one, the other fun one that was very similar to that one was picking up for the NRC out of Toledo, Ohio, for the nuclear power plant there. We had to fly that one all the way to Payne Field in Washington, and we picked up the airplane in Ypsilanti, flew it to Toledo, and then from Toledo we stopped at Fargo, North Dakota, then got gas, and then continued all the way to Payne, Washington with it.
Wow. So you guys would just move all kinds of
Fun.
different things, wouldn't you?
But that was also the time that where the autopilot completely went out on us too, and we had
Oh, you
hand
told
fly
me
that
about this. You
one.
told me about this. Talk about
Yeah,
that for a minute, having to fly a long flight like that with no autopilot.
yeah, no autopilot at all. Hand flying a jet over the Rocky Mountains and everything. Oh, that was a tiring flight. It was mentally exhausting to fly like that. 5.5 hours like that.
Oh my gosh. With no autopilot, no altitude hold, no nothing, huh?
I mean, we had a flight director, but you had the, but you're just imagine just staring at that panel and just keeping everything going straight and all. It was just tiring.
Oh, I can't imagine 5.5 hours without autopilot.
No, no,
You know,
I
well,
can't.
and you and I spoke on the phone about this too, a couple days ago. When the KC-135 got the new digital autopilot, they said, fly it autopilot to the max extent possible. And I never did that. I'm a pilot, I fly. Okay. And I actually got dinged on a check ride. Well, you flew the thing all the way up to altitude, it didn't put the autopilot on. And then when it time to descend, you hand flew everything all the way in there. It says you're supposed to fly with the autopilot on to the max extent possible. And I said, okay, I'm a lieutenant colonel. I've got all this hours. My check pilot was a major. I said, okay, major, define to me what it means when it says max extent possible. And he just kind of went, I see your point. I see your point. So,
Yeah,
but
I'm glad the technology is there and everything. I mean, heck, if it wasn't for the technology, I wouldn't be having this ear and being
yeah,
able to do what I'm doing today. I mean, the technology is wonderful.
yeah,
You just can't get so super dependent on it either. But at the same time, I just wish I was 20 something again so I could utilize this more.
yeah, yeah. And isn't that amazing how far things have come along too? How far the technology in the cockpits has come and how much safer it is to fly. I still have a lot of friends that are afraid to fly, and I tell them,
Mm-hmm.
I said, you can get killed more dead flying, driving the 15 minutes from where I live to downtown Salt Lake than you can flying across the country now. You know,
And some of my early days before, I mean, when I was in between jobs on flying, I drove 18 wheelers down the road, and I've hauled some crazy stuff there too. But to me, the most hazardous job in driving that I've ever done was working as a flatbed driver.
really?
You know, really. And you know why?
Why?
Because you were responsible for all the load securement, just like you are as a cargo pilot.
Yeah,
But um, with the flatbed, you had to do all the tarping, strapping, chaining, securing, make
yeah.
sure it's all tied down and everything. And if something started looking like it was going to get away from you, you had to stop, sometimes on the shoulder of the road,
Yeah.
and fix it before it did get away from you.
So you're load master and pilot all at the same time in a truck.
Mm, yep, yep, all of it.
But what a way to see the country, you know? You got to see the country
True.
from a really different perspective. Well, and I take that statement back. You have been able to see the country from two different perspectives,
Hmm.
literally at ground level and at flight level 420, which is
Hmm.
pretty crazy.
Yep, two different perspectives. And
Yeah.
personally, I prefer being up at flight level 420.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot safer up there than it is down
Yeah.
here.
Well, that's a very interesting statement you just made. A lot safer up there than it is down here, with the thousands of things that can go wrong in an airplane. You're actually
Hmm.
safer in the air than you are on the ground.
Flight safety says that the best piece of hardware that goes into any airplane is a well trained pilot.
Yeah.
That is the best investment. That is the best piece of equipment that can be put on an airplane.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that true?
Mm-hmm.
An
Now, if
experienced
we just
pilot.
make automobile drivers like that, then we would have almost no accidents at all out there.
Yeah. Good luck with that. They, all these drivers don't do simulators like we do, like you and I do, where, okay, there goes your right engine at V1, and all these different kinds of emergencies. And have you ever had an emergency that wasn't covered in any of your procedures or in your book or anything like that?
There was one situation when I was flying the Falcon. It's I don't recall there being a procedure on how to handle it, but the Falcon 20, the fuel system, the way it is designed and everything, the uh, the transfer pumps. You got your wing tanks. The tanks go from there to the transfer through motive fuel pumps to transfer pumps, and then goes on to the feeder tanks that are all the way in the back of the airplane. And those feeder tanks are not interconnected, and but they go to each respective engine.
Okay.
So, with that in mind, the you got the base layout of the fuel system right there. Those transfer pumps are transferring fuel at about 3,000 pounds per hour. Your engines are burning at about 1,100 pounds per hour or
Okay.
1,200 pounds per hour, depending on what your power settings
Yeah.
are. So, but if you are dependent on motive flow, then that's about 1,000 pounds per hour. You
Ooh.
lose those transfer pumps, and this did happen to us once, and we didn't catch it right away. We saw the light, but it's like it didn't really ring a bell that, and it's just a red light. There's no label above it or below it that says transfer pump on it. It's just a little red indicator light. There might have been a label on it a long time ago. It has since worn off or disappeared or whatever over the decades. And I was like, I wonder what that's about. I'm trying to remember my stuff. And I mentioned it to the captain. He goes, well, just, oh, that, I now I remember what that is. That's a transfer pump light. That's a
Ooh.
transfer pump failure.
Yeah.
So we're burning at that present time. We were burning about 1,200 pounds per engine at that time. And then I watched the fuel gauge on the feeder tanks. It was going down, and this one time it got so low the engine could have flamed out.
Oh,
It was entirely possible that engine could have flamed out. We landed, and the engine ran all the way until we got to the gate and got parked and shut down and everything. But there was like maybe 100 or 200 pounds of fuel left over from that.
jeez. That's crazy.
We still have plenty of fuel in the wings, but the transfer pump had quit, and so it wasn't putting the fuel back. And when you got high power settings, it's burning it faster than it can feed it.
Uh, And there's no cross flow between the two pumps, is there?
There's no cross feed between the feeder tanks.
And so you were in a potentially engine flame out condition.
Potentially, yes.
So what did you do? I mean, is that a point where you say, okay, we got to put the jet down, or do you keep going to
No,
your destination?
actually, there's an MEL for it, and you can still fly it like that for 3 days.
3 days?
You can fly it
Not
like
3 hours, but 3 days?
3 days. But
Oh, geez.
you have to pull the power all the way back so that the motive flow would keep up
Yeah.
with the motive flow would keep up with the engine. It was like, oh, this is crazy. This is slow flying for the airplane.
Yeah.
This is like slow flight at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. You just want to get there.
I want to get there. I want to.
Yeah.
I want to get my mission done and go to bed afterwards.
Yeah. So, did you ever fly internationally? Do you fly internationally also, or just in the States?
We are trained. I did both with Ameristar, and I'll be doing that with Fly Exclusive. We will be doing international flying. Mostly, we go up to either Canada or Mexico.
Okay.
And my very first time flying into Mexico was hard, mostly because of my hearing and everything, because I didn't have much experience dealing with the Mexican language. So that was one of my biggest barriers down there, was operating down there.
Yeah.
Flying into Canada was easy. Everybody spoke the same language up there, and it was like, hey, this is great. I like flying up here.
Yeah. You know, and having flown all over the world in the KC-135, there were certain places that we would go where you had trouble interpreting what the ATC controllers were telling. Mali was particularly troublesome. And like I mentioned to you, we were flying missions out of Diego Garcia dealing with Mali. You know, Mali, Mali, Mali. This is Mali. You know, and you'd say, okay, say that again, you know. But I never had a problem anywhere else. You know?
Well, I'd look over at my captain and go, what did he say? He said what? Did you understand that?
Yeah, crazy.
Oh, and the instrument approaches down in Mexico, they would have 4 or 5 different versions of this instrument approach to the same runway, and it'd be like, you want me to do which one?
Yeah. Yeah. And ICAO procedures are very different than US procedures, you know.
Oh, yes. Wow.
Yeah.
And you know, recently one of my sim partner at Flight Safety in Tampa, he was telling me that, and I had a hard time believing this. LPV approaches, localizer precision approach for GPS approaches, LPV are still considered non-precision approaches in ICAO world under ANAX 10. And it's true. And I at first I was like, no, that can't be right. And then I looked it up later, and it's true.
Sure enough.
I couldn't believe it. And here in FAA world, it is considered a precision approach because you have essentially a virtual ILS procedure.
Yeah. Yes, you do.
And it's like this is a precision approach. You got vertical guidance and lateral guidance. You got everything that makes it a precision approach. So to me, it's a precision approach. And yet he's saying, no, it's not. It's a not precision approach. And then apparently ICAO world, it is a not precision.
Yeah, because their rules are so different. Their holding rules are different. And, you know, I remember we were flying over Africa. And of course, in Africa at that time period during the 90s, you know, NDB approaches. Okay.
Oh, I don't want to remember those.
Oh, I know that. I know that. I know that. You know, I mean, look how GPS has really changed our world, three-dimensionally, you know, and
The last NDB approach that I did was probably and it was a practice approach. It was done back in Cessna 172. I think it was down in Florida about 2004, 2005, somewhere
mhm.
around there. But that was my last NDB approach I've ever done.
Uh,
And it's been about 20 years since my last one. I
yeah,
still remember how to do it. It's still here up here in the brain, but
yeah.
um,
And fortunately for the tanker guys, we didn't do a lot of stuff in Africa, but when we did, it was usually some kind of international airport, which had like a VOR of Wartac or something like that, and
yeah.
maybe had an ILS, maybe not. But a lot of my C-130 Bubbas would go into some of these really strange places where literally the NDB was a radio station, some kind of radio station on the ground, or was
Or
something.
an AM station like
Yeah,
WMT
yeah,
600.
yeah, exactly, a radio station like that. Okay, and uh, they made a very. I remember going through instrument refresher and them saying, okay, the IKO procedures for this are very different, and particularly when you saw it in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
In the 90s, there were some places in the Middle East that you had to kind of watch out for. But for the most part, flying to Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, uh, even Kuwait, Oman, you know, things were pretty normal. But there were some places that weren't so normal. You know, Fortunately, in my airplane, because of the nature of what I did, and that we had to have a lot of fuel and a big ramp, the places we went to didn't have those kinds of approaches. We'd have to do those kinds of approaches. But I remember in 1980s doing VOR approaches in the little T-37 into places even in the United States, you know, VOR non-precision approach into.
What speed did you shoot those approaches at with the T
So
37?
in the T-37, you're going about 130 knots. You're going pretty slow. Uh, the T-37, it was it was one of those love-hate relationships. Okay. Loved it because it was real easy to fly. Loved it because it was very maneuverable. Okay. And a matter of fact, there's more pilots that have G-induced loss of consciousness at that time period, believe it or not, flying in the Tweet than in the T-38s and other airplanes. It was uh, very good on instrument approaches, very good in formation, all those kinds of things. But the con of flying the T-37 is it had really old avionics,
Oh my
really
God.
1950s avionics. Okay. All right. Yeah. TMI needle and all these kinds of things.
It's
You
like
know,
flying the Falcon, all these
yeah, it
round
was, yeah,
dials and everything.
exactly. It was all round dial. Okay. And I'll tell you a story about this. And it was an emergency procedure. And I talk about the 5 rules of flying, right? The 5 commandments of flying. Rule number 1, fly the jet. Rule number 2 is instruments are your friend. Rule number 3, trim is like breathing. Rule number 4, radio calls do not generate lift. And rule number 5, above all else, sound cool on the radio. Well, the only radio I had in the T-37 on a training flight at Vance Air Force Base, it went transmit only, not receive. The receiver went out. And so I'm going out to the aux field and everything. And I'm like, why is nobody talking to me? And I'm fussing with the radio. They always tell you change the channel, change it back, all those kind of things. And Dogface was the name of the aux field, the call sign for the aux field. And I remember saying, Dogface, do you read? Nothing. Dogface, this is Kenny 27. Do you read? Nothing. Okay. So I get the radio out checklist, out and the in-flight guide and everything. And the first thing it says, fly the jet. Second thing it says, keep transmitting no matter what. And I came down initial and I said, hey, Dogface, this is Kenny 27. Give me a green light if you can hear me. And sure enough, I'm coming down initial and I see the green light. Okay, they can hear me. And I say, okay, I'm transmit only. I can't receive. I'm going home, going to initial, and I'm going to land. Would you call forward and tell them that? All right. And this was not long after I had uh, soloed out. All right. Well, I broke two rules. All right. Radio calls do not generate lift, and I didn't fly the jet. And the radio was over here. So you're having to go like this. Okay. And on the way back, I inadvertently reached over and went forward on the stick and didn't realize it. And I'm sitting there playing with the radio, turning
It
on, turning
is
on, turning on. Okay.
so easy to
It's
make
so
that
easy to make
mistake.
that mistake. Okay. And so I'm over here playing and everything like that. And then I realized, I've been playing with this for a long time. And I looked up and I was about 700 feet. I'm supposed to be at 1,500 feet. I'm at 700 feet, just a couple hundred feet above the trees. And it just immediately just shocked me. And of course, I pull back up to 1,500 feet and everything. And I'm going, okay, that was really dumb. Leave the radio alone. Quit trying to fix it in the air. Fly the airplane back. And, you know, you're supposed to call an emergency airplane, squawk 7700. I'd done all that but couldn't hear anybody, but they could hear me. And I came up to initial. I said, Kenny 27, radio out, rocking my wings, full stop. Okay. And so I rock my wings like this. They give me the green gun light, that means you're clear to land, pitch out, come in and land. All right. And taxi off. And of course, you wait for the green gun from tower to taxi to your parking spot. I see the green light and taxi off. All right. But I got in there and I basically told my instructor, he says, hey, great job, great job. And I said, no, not really. He goes, what do you mean? And I said, here's what really happened. All right. I was fussing too much with the radio, leaning over like this. And again, the T-37 cockpit was the pilot interface. The pilot vehicle interface was terrible in the cockpit. And I was reaching over like this, doing all this stuff, push forward on the stick, realizes the last minute, I pull out. And again, old equipment, old ADI, all the little off flags, little, bars like this, on an ADI that's only this big,
Yep,
and,
yep.
and, but the really cool
Been
thing
there.
was, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've flown with this kind of, kind of equipment, and it sucks. And I look back now and I think to myself, man, I learned how to fly on really old avionics. Because even when we got in the T-37, we had HSI and ADI, but it was, again, nothing that showed you position, terrain around you, like in the T-38C models.
Well, and
And
that's all this equipment that I have today. I mean, like this G3000 equipment, it shows everything. You have more situational awareness ability
yeah,
than with that old equipment that we were working with. How we survived. Hey, we're
yeah,
survivors.
I know, I know. We actually landed at the right place on the right runway, you know, and there's later in my career, because of my experiences in flying with older equipment, I had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of co-pilots and that would say, why are you doing all this work? Because I would actually make a complete operational navigational chart of the mission that we were doing. And it was just kind of my way to do mission analysis. Where's the bases that we need to go to if we're in trouble? What's the tower frequency? All those kinds of things. And I have that all on a map. And I'd literally get out the pubs and look at okay, what's the magnetic variation on the vortac? I'd plot that all out. So every line, everything was all on this one chart. And I know a lot of people, would look at me and go, well, like, why are you doing that? And then one day when I had an emergency going through the Straits of Gibraltar, where we had a HF radio go out, because
Oh boy.
I had done that kind of thing, I knew where to go. All right. And the
Mm-hmm.
crew, it was a fairly new crew. And the pilot, the aircraft commander, had come from the C-130 world. He didn't have a lot of 135 experience and had a fairly new co-pilot with him. And they couldn't figure out what to do. We couldn't go to lodges because we couldn't talk on HF. I said, gentlemen, Rota, Spain. And they're like going, we don't even know where that is. And I said, believe me, that's where we're going to go. All right. And we end up landing there. And I worry sometimes, Steve, that this kind of technology makes pilots complacent because they rely on the
It
iPad too
can.
much.
It has the very high potential of doing just that. The one of the situations we talked about at, at flight safety was, if all of these screens, you're on a flight, and we only talked about, we didn't actually do it in the simulator, but all of the screens suddenly go dark, and all you're operating off of is that standby equipment. And that standby equipment, by the way, doesn't have a compass on it. You still have to use the whiskey compass that's still up there.
Yeah,
And
that's some precise flying, isn't it?
I couldn't believe that. I was like, oh, are you kidding me? We have all this fancy equipment, and this standby thing doesn't even have a heading indicator built into it or anything. Oh my
No,
God.
no.
So we're still doing things by the whiskey compass.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
hate the whiskey
yeah.
compass.
You're flying like Lindbergh did then, you know. You know what? I remember doing approaches, no gyro approaches where your avionics were
No
out and
gyro. Yep.
the controller was telling you, turn, stop, turn, stop, turn, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
I
Yep.
remember doing PARs, precision approach radar, Steve, no gyro vectors. Okay. Because that was
I've
one of
done
our
that
training events.
too. Yep.
That was one of our training events. Boy, we are really dating ourselves, aren't we?
Oh yes, yes. I had a situation back in my. It actually resulted in an accident for me. I have an accident on my record.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
was flying for Baron Aviation at the time, flying caravans, single pilot, no co-pilot. We did have an autopilot on board, so that
Mhm.
was a nice, useful feature. And it was all freight. It was all boxes back there. And this one particular day, going from Lubbock, Texas to Roswell, New Mexico. And you can look it up in the NTSB records too.
Mhm.
Um, what happened there was the initial weather reports were not really, did not come out and say ice.
Yeah.
They didn't come out and say ice, but I was suspecting ice. I was planning on seeing ice. And this particular day, it was really bad. We actually had freezing drizzle or something out there, but I picked up ice like I could not believe. I had ice in places I should not have had ice. And it was mostly because I was flying slower than I should have been. And all I was trying to do was get up on top of the deck so that I could get out of that stuff.
Yeah.
And once the airplane was all coated up, it didn't matter how much I pushed that power up. I probably could have pushed it up a little bit more and taken it right to the red line, but I was like trying to fly the way that everybody wanted me to fly it. So I was trying to stick to that, but I probably could have put a lot more power in and powered my way through it, but I didn't. But I had that thing covered up in so much ice that I found I had trim runaway. The autopilot just kept right on going. I
Yeah.
was like, whoa, wait a minute. You're. And then I remember reading a little bit about, if you put out about 10 degrees of flap, that may give you a little bit of extra lift and give you a lot
Yeah.
more. I lost over 200 feet putting the flaps out. So
Oh,
I was like leaving the flaps up,
yeah.
suck those flaps back up, not doing that. Hand flying this thing for the next at least a good 45 minutes in ice. I'm manually trying to run the boots, hand fly it. Oh, it was um, it was a very unpleasant experience,
Very
and
challenging.
yeah, and the controllers apparently declared me an icing emergency, and I didn't know. I never said icing emergency throughout the entire flight. It was only after the everything was all said and done that I declared icing emergency. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever. You're
Yeah.
done already. But when I got to Roswell, I just figured since the storm was moving to the west or to the east, and I'm heading west, if I keep right on going, eventually I will get out of this
Yeah.
stuff. So I just kept going west because I had the option. They said, you want to turn around and go back? And I was like, I just flew through that. Why do I want to go back into the stuff that got me into more trouble?
Yeah.
So I kept right on going to Roswell, and um, they talked me down. They just said, just listen to my voice. I'm going to give you a PAR approach, and it's not in our op specs. We weren't authorized to do a PAR, but I
Yeah.
was essentially an emergency situation. So, rule book out the window and
Yeah.
did what the guy told me to do. I got down. Once I got out of the clouds, I was almost halfway down the runway. I was like, okay, I'm just going to stay below the cloud deck, just circled a bit back around, came back in, and I got a little too slow right just before the wheels touched down on the runway. I got a little too slow, stalled it. The airplane rolled violently to the left, and left wing impacted the ground and got bent upward. Bounced it
Oh,
back into the air, put it on its wheels, and I said, I'm done. I'm parked. I'm safe. And shut it down right then and there on the runway
oh my gosh.
and lived to tell the tale.
Yeah. Yeah. So how many PARs had you done like that before you had to do it this time? Had you ever done anything like that before?
Nope. That was my first and only time. I have never done a PAR since then.
See, isn't that
Even
fascinating, man?
prior to that, I'd never done one. I talked about it in class. I taught instrument students how to do these things, but
Had never
never the
done one.
real thing.
Had never done one. Now, see, that speaks to the relationship that a pilot has with a controller during an emergency situation. You're doing some things that you had never done before, and yet it gets you on the ground. The airplane is a little sick. The airplane's a little bent up, but you know what? The airplane can be fixed and you're alive. All because that air traffic controller said, hey, I got an idea. We can get you on the ground.
Bingo. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of those places. That's one of those situations where, yeah, radio calls don't generate lift. Well, sometimes those radio calls actually save your life. Because
It,
how many solo pilots, how many first time solo pilots have had some trouble in the air and the ATC controller and the tower goes, okay, calm down. We'll get you down. Okay.
yep.
There's a real
Just work
famous
with
one.
me. I'll work with you.
Yeah.
We'll get it done.
Yeah. There's a real famous one where this young gal, some teenager gal is on her first solo ride and she has a gear malfunction. And the guy talks her
Guess
down.
what?
Has a gear malfunction. It's like the nose gear doesn't come down.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. The nose gear doesn't come down. And he actually gets her back on the ground. She goes, hey, I got unsafe gear indication. And her instructor is in the tower talking to her. The controller's talking to her, calming her down and go, we got this. This will be easy. You know, they did not have her fly down the runway, low to the runway, so that somebody could go out and try and pull the gear down. They just said, just land on the nose. We can fix the cowling, we can fix the prop, just land on the nose.
Yeah.
And she got it down. She did. You know, she got it down.
It, it,
Anyway,
it can be done.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I hadn't bent the wing on on that caravan, but at the same time, I'm still here to tell the tale.
Yeah.
The airplane was fixed up and is apparently still back in service, flying
Yeah.
and everything. So it's like,
So did they do it? Did they NTSB do an investigation?
yep. Here was the other. Here, this is the part that really held me up with my flying career, because when you had an accident like that, FedEx didn't like that. They were
Yeah.
like, we're gonna have to let you go and everything. So I understand. So because that was my screw up. If I had kept my speed up and driven the thing right onto the runway, kept my speed up, put it right on the runway, accident never would have happened,
Yeah.
because I never would have stalled out. So,
Yeah.
um, and then so, but the NTSB, I mean, this is a cut and dry. It was a pilot error. Even I admit I screwed up on that one. Oh well, I I learned from that mistake, and I will not make that mistake
Yeah.
again. So, um, but the NTSB took 4 years to wrap that one up.
Really? 4 years? That's a long
Four.
time.
That was a painfully long time. Nobody in the 121 world wanted to hire me with an ongoing NTSB
Yeah.
investigation. I had to call all the way out to the um, regional NTSB headquarters in Colorado. They had jurisdiction over my case and say, um, the first guy retired. It was 2 years later. I called him up and say, "Hey, how are you coming with my accident investigation?" And then he was like, "I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. I'll get it wrapped up soon." He retired, and then this new guy came on, and he goes, "Yeah, I see it. I'm working on it." And then he retired, and I got fed up at that point. And
Oh, yeah.
this is, like I say, 4 years later. I called up the Colorado location and said, "Look, guys, this is taking a really painfully long time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to move my career along. You guys are holding me up. What's the beef?" And he's like, "I don't know, but I'm going to find out and I will get back to you on this." And about 2 months later, he called me up and said, "Found the beef. We're fixing it. It had to be moved on to
Yeah.
the national level of
Yeah.
the NTSB. They had to do their review of everything. And then about 6 months later, it was all done. So, in a nutshell, it was almost 5 years.
Oh, jeez.
I was like, that was stupid.
Yeah.
That was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because normally they only take about a year, maybe
Yeah.
2 years at the most.
Yeah.
So my experience with the NTSB has not been pleasant.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Sounds like it.
So,
Hey, brother, we've been going for an hour and a half.
yeah. Oh, wow.
It's been great to have you on, Steve. I mean,
Hey,
there's
it's
some
been
really good
great to
nuggets
be
here.
here.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate you sharing. I appreciate you being open about an investigation too, because a lot of pilots wouldn't talk about that. Thank you for, being kind of vulnerable and talking about, hey, here's a day where I didn't do so well. A lot of people wouldn't do
Well, I
that.
tell everybody this is what you don't want to
Yeah.
don't.
But you know what? That's the great
I
lesson
mean,
learned too. Look at all the lessons you learned from
yeah.
that one, you know, experience. And yeah, you had a report out of it, but you know what? People that read that go, "Oh, okay, I won't make that mistake." You learn from your mistakes.
And that's the thing I want everybody to take from that is don't do what I did in that particular instance.
Mm-hmm.
But like with regard to my ears, where there's a will, there's a waiver. There's so many things we can do, and then there's the things we don't want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a little bit of plus and minus, and it all balances out. So it's been great.
Yeah, and here you are flying again, flying cargo, you know, shuttling 25-pound boxes. You have no idea what's in it, but here we go. You know, it's like time sensitive cargo,
Well, I'm
time sensitive cargo, but
interested to see how this goes with flying people around now. So that'll be a whole new experience all by itself.
oh, so you're doing passengers now too.
We Fly Exclusive is passenger operation charter on demand charter operation.
Ah, and what equipment are you flying that? I'm
Uh,
assuming the
the,
same
the
airplane.
Citation CJ3.
Okay.
I'll be flying the old Collins equipment and the Garmin equipment.
Yeah.
So I'm cross trained for both airframes with
Hmm.
different avionics on them.
How many airplanes does the company have? If you don't mind, how big is their fleet?
Well, last I looked on uh, Flight Aware, not Flight Aware, but Airline Pilot Central,
Yeah.
uh, they said they have about 40 some odd airplanes on
Wow.
for the
Wow.
CJ3.
Okay. See,
Yeah.
like I said, brother, I'm not real familiar with executive type business aviation, so I'm gonna have to go look up what a CJ3 is. But Citation Jet, obviously, with a really
I'm
nice
sorry, it's
configuration.
21. It says here it's 21 CJ3s. There's 43 XL, XLS type citations. So, yeah, there's two different models, and
Okay.
we're supposed to be getting a whole bunch of new airplanes in the near future too. So I have no idea what those are going to be, but we're slated for some major growth. We're still
Yeah.
hiring pilots as
Yeah.
fast as we can get them. Although our hiring standards are way up there, you got to have at least 2,000 hours at the very bare minimum
Yeah.
to apply. 3,000 is more the preferred
Yeah.
level.
Hmm.
I mean, and the
Interesting.
nice thing is we don't have a 70 rule, 65 or 70 rules. So I mean, you can fly until you can't pass the medical.
Oh, that's fascinating. I've got several of my
Mm,
friends that have left the military and have left airlines, at 65 that are flying for private companies now. One guy's flying
mm-hmm.
a Honda jet. He loves the Honda jet.
Yeah, we just acquired a company named Volato. And so with Volato being gone, all their Honda jets are now coming over to us.
Oh, interesting. I got to see one up close at NBAA a couple weeks ago. That was really, it's
It's a
not very,
weird
oh, it
design.
is. It's a really strange design. But you know what? It looked very comfortable. It had a really good Garmin system in it, and
I'm impressed.
yeah, it's an impressive little airplane, okay? Bombardier had all of their lineup down there too. I got to go inside the Global Express 7600, which was just freaking phenomenal. Oh my gosh. And it had all those avionic tools that we've talked about, heads up guidance system, synthetic vision,
One of my friends is a
everything.
captain working for NetJets on the Global,
Yeah.
and she just loves the beast.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
met I met several of the pilots, the demo pilots there, and they all said the same thing. They said this is really a Cadillac. Everybody talks about Gulfstream. Everybody wants a Gulfstream. Everybody's heard of Gulfstream, G4, G5, G6, and everything. But believe it or not, my son is in the music industry and got to fly home from Paris, actually London to Van Nuys on a 6500 Global Express owned by a billionaire here in Utah. And he says, Dad, it was just freaking amazing. Just a beautiful, beautiful, comfortable airplane. They
The
were
only
10
thing I wish
hours in the
about
air.
the CJ3 is I wish I could stand up in the thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tall people have problems in short jets. Yeah. Anyway. Hey, Steve, it's been great to
Hey,
have you on, man.
it's been good. Like I say, if you ever want to get back into flying and come out here and use all this fun stuff that I'm getting to do, I'll get you into one of these things.
Okay. I'll take you
And
up on that, man.
I have kept all of my flight instructor ratings so I can teach everybody how to do everything.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
I'm not giving up my flight instructor stuff. I
Yeah.
will.
Yeah. Well, I've got thousands of hours in KC-135s. I think I'll be a pretty easy student. You know, as a matter of
You,
fact, you know what, Steve? Um, Back in August, I got to fly the KC-46 simulator at Portsmouth at Pease Air Force Base.
the Pegasus?
I got to fly Pegasus, yeah, the 767 tanker. And you know what, Steve? It never goes away. As a
Nope.
matter of fact, it was easier because the 767 is so automated, dial in your airspeed, auto throttle, and again, the instructor says, hey, let the autopilot do that. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? You know, I'm a pilot, but it
A
was,
pilot.
but the thing was, you know what? They had things on the displays. There was this little banana like thing at the bottom. Okay. And what it was a flight path marker based on bank angle and all these kinds of
We
things.
have that.
And so in 30 seconds, the end of that banana is where we're going to be in 30 seconds. And so
Exactly.
I was flying a visual approach, and he said, just follow the banana. And I go, okay, I'm not banana familiar. And he goes, see the little thing right down there? He says, that's where you're going to be in 30 seconds. He says, when you get a quarter, when you're halfway around the turn to line up on the runway, just put that like on the center line of the runway, and it will take you right there. And then all you got to worry about is pitch and power from then. All
Pitch
right.
and power. Yep.
And you know what? He was absolutely right. I landed the freaking beast on speed, on center line. It was amazing.
I,
You know?
I, up until I got into the G3000 and start flying that, we have
Yeah.
that very similar setup. It's a little circle thing with a couple of bars sticking out and
Yeah.
one up on
Yeah.
the top.
Yeah.
That's the flight path mark. You put that thing right where you want it, and the airplane will be right where you.
Right where you want it. It was amazing. And like I said, I hadn't flown my last flight in the KC-135 was in May of 2003. I've flown a CRJ sim with a good friend of mine that teaches at University or Utah Valley University in their program.
Yeah.
All right. The same thing. I do one approach, we do a touch and go, and he goes, okay, Mr. Pilot, whoop, takes the throttle back at V1. What are you going to do now? And I just go through all the motions, it doesn't matter which airplane you're flying in. The checklist in your head is all the same thing, and going around and everything. And I'm having him do stuff. I'm doing stuff, everything. And finally we come back around, land, out of this single engine approach. And we bring both throttles up on the touch go, come around. He goes, you and I just did something I'm having a very difficult time teaching my students. I says, what's that? I said, cockpit resource management. They think they have to do everything, and it was, you get to a point where you've got so much flying experience that, it was easy for me to get in the KC-7.
You do it. You
Yeah.
do it without
The
even
46.
thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I will tell you that the KC-46 is an overpowered brick. Because, man, when we put the throttles up on that sucker, and we're in a full motion sims, Steve, it was
Oh
like,
yeah.
whoa, you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
these engines on these
yeah,
things,
yeah.
the,
We're
we
climbing out
have
at 12 degrees. We're climbing out 12 degrees nose high, you know? I'm like, wow. He goes, yeah, it's pretty cool. These big engines, aren't, isn't it? Anyway.
even our we have on these citations Williams International FJ 44-3As. All that, but
Yeah.
these engines are so good and everything.
Yeah.
As far as they've been able to tell me, nobody has ever lost an engine on one of these things.
Yeah.
They are that reliable. They are that good. They are. And when I did my V1 cuts and everything, they have a system called rudder bias in there, and that helped.
Yeah.
The rudder bias made V1 cuts easy. I was like, wow.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the IPO I was flying with told me about that. he said, he says we only practice, single engine approaches in the sim and everything like that. But he says we've got Boeing put a system in here that automatically, puts the right rudder input based on RPM of the engine and yaw and all these different things, that
Yep,
you
it
hardly even
senses
know.
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
It senses it. He says you'll see this little like that real quick. When the engine goes out, you kind of see this little like sideways turn, a little quick sideways turn. And he says immediately everything senses. And we had kind of a similar thing in the KC-135, the EFAS system that sensed when there was a 1500 RPM difference between the two engines, that thing would start to go on, okay, here it comes, and start putting rudder input in, you know, crazy. I know the amount of systems that we had now that do all this stuff for us. It makes
I,
it, it makes it, it's so easy.
wow. 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 We've been around the block once or twice.
Yeah, we have, haven't we? So if I ever come out to Cedar Rapids, brother, I'll look you up. Let's do that. Let's
Hey,
go.
sounds good. I
Go
got your
spend some
phone
time.
number, you got mine,
Yeah,
and
I'd
hey,
really
have a
like to
good.
come back there because I've got a lot of friends, obviously, at Collins Aviation, and come
The
back.
sad part is it's no longer Collins. It is,
It's
uh,
Collins Aerospace now. They dropped the
yeah, it's
Rockwell.
Collins Aerospace now. But
Yeah, yeah, I
did
know.
you hear that the CEO from Collins Aerospace is now running Boeing?
Kelly Ortberg. Yeah,
I was amazed to hear that.
yeah. He came out of retirement. He's got his work ahead of him.
I'm
He's got
very
his work ahead of him.
interested to see how he turns Boeing around, and I think he can do it
Oh,
too.
I do. I believe that totally, Steve. If anybody could do that, Kelly can. Okay.
Yeah,
And I've met him several times. I've briefed him a couple times. Really nice guy, really wicked smart. Okay.
I have
But
never met him myself, but the industry says a lot about
yeah,
it.
and they should because he was. Clay Jones was the CEO when I got there. He's a former F-15 guy, and then Kelly took over for him, and really impressed with Kelly. And if anybody can turn Boeing around, it'll be him. But man, he's got a real uphill battle he's got to deal with. I have a lot of friends that are in Boeing that in a lot of different places, and they're telling me it's really broke in
Oh,
in
I
many different
believe it.
in many
Based on
different
what I've
ways.
seen from the strike. I mean, when I was
Yeah,
out at Payne, when I was just visiting out at
yeah,
Payne, there was a lot of negative energy out there. It was like
yeah.
this place is a dumpster fire.
Exactly, exactly. A lot of negative energy, and you know what? That's a really good description because these guys are telling me some things, and your negative energy connotation is a really good way to describe that. And you think about that too because Boeing has been, the top dog for so long. You look at all the airplanes that it's created, and
I
and
was
you,
last year when I was on the job market. I was hoping to go work with Atlas because I wanted to fly some heavy iron, and
yeah,
I really wanted to get on with them, but they weren't hiring at the time. And then Fly Exclusive snatched me up, and I'm
yeah,
off the job market now. But I really wanted to go fly at least a 777 or the 74,
yeah,
and I would have loved my one captain at Ameristar. He was a retired 7-4 driver, and he was telling me all these wonderful things about the
yeah,
7-4 and the triple
yeah,
seven. And he goes, the one you really want to lay your hands on is the 7-4 because it's the queen. It's the
yeah,
best of the best.
yeah. If uh if they ever do start hiring again, Monday I'm interviewing one of my buddies from pilot training who's a recruiter for Atlas.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he flew 747s. He flew both the 400 and the new eights, and with the new engines and everything. And he says the same thing. He says, Mark, the 747 is absolutely the queen of the fleet. And he says, particularly when he got to the eights, the dash eights, he said it was like a big, huge leap when he went from the 400s to the dash eights. He says it was really cool.
yeah.
So
I'm kind of locked in with my present company for at least the next year or two, but
yeah,
I'm going to be pushing 52 in January, and I'm not sure if they're going to want a person like me. I mean, I know the age 65 rule is still alive there, but
Yeah.
still, I would like to hope that maybe we'll
Yeah.
see. Don't know what the future holds, all that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, brother. I've said this twice, 3 times now. All right. Great to have you on. Thanks for spending time with me today, Steve. And thanks for being on the Let's Into the Cockpit show, man.
Hey, have a good one till next time. Have a good one.
I was really excited to have Steve on, and now you can see why. Flying with a cochlear earplant. A lot of people say, I may not be able to be a pilot because I have some physical defect. I know pilots that fly with artificial limbs. And now we just talked to a pilot who lost his hearing, only has hearing in one ear because of modern technology. Thanks, Steve, for coming on and telling your story. This episode 93, is brought to you and financially supported by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. Like you see this KC-135 above me, they peel off and stick to any flat surface. They are also weatherproof, we have found out. There's 154 ready to print on the website right now, famous airplanes. Or let us do a custom print for you. Just fill out the form and tell us, hey, what's your favorite airplane? We'll put your name on it, tail number, unit you like. We can even do weapons load for the modern jets. Go to wallpilot.com and order 1 or 2 of these great prints to financially support the show. Next week, we're going to have one of my good buds from pilot training on. He left pilot training and went into the WC-135, collecting air samples. It's got a great story about when Chernobyl blew up, and then went into C5s, and then subsequently flying 747s for Atlas. I appreciate all of you for coming and listening in. This and previous episodes can be found on my YouTube channel at Mark Hasara or on the website, markhasara.com. Thanks for coming by. Look forward to talking to you next week on the Lessons from the Cockpit show. Sluggo out here.